Okay, we're live.
So I'll just back up a minute. Re-codification used to mean new paper book with the city code in it. Every time we would produce an update with new ordinances that the city council passed, we'd have to send out packets of paper to all the official code book holders, and they could incorporate that in their book. This is obviously not a great way with available technology today to have live, up-to-date, easily accessed, easily searchable city code that anybody can use. We know how to create that, and so we hired American Legal Publishing. We've got them creating a new city code for us, but with really the goal of not trying to rewrite the city code to make it say what we want it to say, but rather rewrite the city code's format so that it is easier to use, it is accessible to anyone, it is searchable, and it's easy for us to maintain on an ongoing basis. So we're going to go through their memo today, and Patrick's going to lead us through that, and we'll look at each of the things they asked us to think about before we do a final draft and bring it through the city council to actually have an approval process on it. We're not trying to fix everything yet. We do think there'll be a short list of policy questions for you to work on after the codification is done. So we'll come back and revisit a couple of those that they've pointed out. And then we'll be able to really do that on an ongoing basis forever. Every time there's a policy question that you've got, you want to deal with, we can change the code, pass an ordinance. It's instantly published in our new electronic code. It's searchable, it's up to date, it's always live, and we don't have to worry about sending out paper inserts to everybody. Law enforcement will have access, live access to all the latest ordinances. Any citizen who has a question will be able to look it up. This is what we're looking to have here. So without further ado, now we're going to work our way through their memo today and all the questions that they've asked for us, which Patrick has categorized into things that Chris also looked into and said, yep, that's a good idea, go ahead, or things where we as administrative staff have a little work to do, and we'll talk about what that looks like, or things where there are questions that the council needs to answer, or a few of what I said before, things that we'll probably consider just passing as is, but putting on a work to-do list for updating our policies on in the next year or two. So questions on that, or should we just jump into this memo? It's yours, Patrick.
Okay. All right. Can everyone see the legal review?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and I'll just get down to business because I'm assuming you guys have looked at this. To the first thing we need to interact with is we'll just go through the notes. So number one, just kind of going over how the code is organized, and I think we can leave that alone unless anyone wants to say anything about that. Number two, the definitions and rules are not repeated, so that they're just using a standard, like they have one place and then they're referring to those rules. Number three, we've removed severability. I don't actually know what that what that means. So I think I'm just going to jump directly to number 8, which is the first comment that we need to interact with. So number 8, many municipalities insert, and prior to the actual code, a section page acknowledging the current officials of the municipality. If you desire such an acknowledgement, the responses to this report should include a current list of the officials. Should such a acknowledgement page be included to the code, and that is a council decision. So we can just, I guess, take a quick roll call vote on that or discuss that.
You can imagine how that makes more sense when what we're talking about is publishing a book that we expect to last for a while. And in this case, it'll be an electronic document that we'll be updating. And it doesn't seem like the place we want to have current contact info for officials. So this is really a question of, does it make sense to memorialize who was here when this formatting was created? And that's just entirely up to you all.
So when you talk about electronic, Mike, does that mean that it's going to be out on our website?
That's right.
And we can't, I mean, like a book, I think of a personnel book that let's pick 3M. Maybe you have a personnel book that as things change, you can update and just change out that page or not. That would be too difficult to just insert for that year who people could. I guess we're on the web page though too, aren't we? All of us as
Yeah.
officials.
That's my thought too, Kelly, is this isn't the place people are going to look for current contact info, and we'll have a place that's easier to find than this, I think.
Yeah. Yep. I get it.
Yeah, I don't see any real reason to have us memorialized in this way.
So I don't know how we should proceed exactly. Do you want to? Is it appropriate to do like a roll call vote on this?
Well, let's talk about that quick process. Anytime you need to make a decision in this meeting, I think if there is conversation like this where a few folks make a point and it's kind of agreed upon and nobody else says anything, then we're going to take that as the direction you want us to go. You can make motions here and seconds and vote on things too. So if there is some disagreement about an issue, that's what I would recommend.
Okay, well, it seems like we're leaning towards declining including that page. And I'll just mark that down and move on. So number 9, if you wish to review other municipal codes that we host on our website. So this is just saying you can look at examples of other codes that American Legal has produced. Number 10, the contract price for this codification is $9,450. The estimated page count was 475 pages for a single column. I won't go into these. This is just worth noting. Number 11, please note most of these questions will require a yes or no response, but where there is no response to a comment below by the city, we will not make any of the suggested changes as contemplated in that comment unless otherwise noted. Number 12, copies of state laws are available through this link. 13, whenever a statute or rule is cited after the citation, the words "as it may be amended from time to time" has been added to in your code under Minnesota Statute 471.62, which authorizes cities to adopt laws and rules by reference. I don't see any need to go deeper into this, just information. Number 14, the league suggests that the city adopt all fees in an annual fee ordinance. Please notice that cities may also set fees for resolution. However, state law requires many fees to be adopted by ordinance. So, again, this is just information, not an action. So I'll leave this alone unless there's any questions. So, Here's another one. So 15, please review the following sections whose monetary amounts are 5 years old or older to ensure that they are still valid. It's referring to several sections in the code. This is one that we're suggesting that we codify and then make adjustments to after we've codified it, unless there is any reason not to from the council.
So just for example, some of these fees are business license fees. So alcohol permits, for instance, or fees for zoning applications. And we have from time to time reviewed fees for some of those and decided whether they're still appropriate or whether they need to be adjusted, and passed an ordinance then to amend them as a council saw fit at that time. So this process is saying, just take a look at all of them, which we will do in the office. I don't think that any of them are going to be inaccurate, though. So if we wanted to change them, it would be, I think the better process would be for this council or staff to identify a fee that they don't think is appropriate anymore in the context of it being charged to someone, and then go through the process of discussing what's it supposed to cover, what's a fair price, and then passing an ordinance. Something that we can do at any time. So I don't think we want to try and tackle all of these fees in that way right now.
All right. So then number 16 is just noting that you have access to contact Staff Attorney Devon Grove Merritt directly and discuss any questions or questions about this review. Okay, so here's an action item, number 17. Note that we have replaced all references to non-intoxicating malt liquor to 3-2 malt liquor. Is this revision acceptable to you? And it should be noted that Chris recommended making that change. That seems like I'm getting a lot of nods, so I'll just mark that down just a moment here. All right. Number 18, please note we suggest creating and maintaining consistency throughout your code. Please note that the terms clerk, clerk treasurer, and clerk/treasurer appear throughout your code. Please identify which is the correct term you wish to use throughout.
And I'm going to recommend that none of them are the correct term. That, you know, they're now noticing that over time, as ordinances are passed and codified, they use whatever term happens to be the chief officer of the city at the time. And we have had that position called city administrator for 15 years now. And in the code section that establishes the city administrator position, it states that the city administrator serves as the clerk treasurer. So I think they can all be replaced with city administrator.
And that's in line with the ordinance then, correct? That city administrator is the term that we're using professionally. So that seems to make sense, right?
I think if we're searching for consistency, that's how we're describing it now. So to include any of those other terms, I mean, we haven't really concerned ourselves with it, because you can always say, if the code says the clerk is responsible for this, the code also says the administrator is the clerk. And so it's still, there's a legal pathway to understanding what's going on. But if you want it to be consistent, then city administrator is the term we've used.
I think it should be consistent with whatever our job description has. We don't currently have a clerk treasurer or clerk for the city, correct?
Yeah, again, that's something that's included in the duties of the city administrator in the job description. So they're not a separate position.
Right. So it should read what the actual job position is, I think, not part of the duties, but what it is. So I think city administrator would be good.
Sounds good. Okay. Please note that the following references to state law have been repealed, recodified, or otherwise invalid. We therefore suggest making the following revisions. Shall we do so? And that's another one where Chris has agreed with it. I'm looking now to what exactly they are referring to. Oh, there, it's below the. So these are references to state laws, and I'm not sure exactly about them. But Chris's recommendation on this one was that we should have them make those changes. Okay. Number 20, Chapter 10, General Provisions. The purpose of this chapter is to reduce duplication and create consistency throughout the code. We have used the MVC model chapter while retaining provisions from your old code where appropriate. The purpose of this chapter is to replace obsolete and repetitive ordinance sections with comprehensive general code, most of which are self-explanatory in nature and need no particular comment. However, we ask that you review the chapter and advise if anything is unclear or unsatisfactory. Is this chapter acceptable to you as presently edited? And then, so I can pull up chapter 10. Just a moment here. Okay. So this is a lot of information here. So again, this would be one where probably the recommendation is to codify it and then make adjustments after we've made the recodification.
And I'd say a lot of this language in their general provisions is things that they're bringing to the table. So this is kind of standardized best practice for the general rules of the city code that they're suggesting that we adopt. In a lot of cases, it's the general best practice rules that we already had in our old city code, but just organized in a new way. So it's in this section. But there are a couple of examples of things that they've added as well. And I think this is what we were buying from them when we hired an outside firm to work on this for us, rather than just go and make sure that it was all up to date ourselves, was to get this type of new formatting and new description of rules and talk about general provisions and definitions and everything else. So I would recommend that we adopt what they're suggesting here. But there's a couple of sections I think we do need to look at and at least notice and talk about. They have supplemental administrative penalties. So chapter 10.98, and it's on page 10, Patrick.
Okay. Can everyone see that?
So this is in the code that, the version you have access to as well if you want to read it at a different time and really dig into it. But the gist here is that we have had some situations where we're looking for something short of a deputy writing a full criminalized ticket to someone. let's say a parking ticket, where we used to give out $10 parking tickets in our downtown area, and we don't have any provisions in our existing code to do that. So if a parking ticket's written by a deputy, it has to be a vehicle, criminal vehicle violation sort of thing that is a pretty stiff fine, and it's not likely to happen, honestly. So this section and section like it basically is giving this council authority to create administrative penalties for certain crimes that could be handled just at a local level, where we're giving a fine for something that you've determined is a crime in the city code, and that there is a process for someone who is fined with one of these penalties to come to the council and plead their case. So that's kind of the due process element of it that we don't have in the existing code that would be in the code now. So although this section is creating that process, what it's not creating is any instances of these penalties in our code. So this will be good kind of backbone for us to have in our code. And then when we get to some of the other code enforcement conversations that we've been having, and we talk about what some of our strategies are going to be to deal with that, this will help us. This will support that conversation by allowing us a different option.
All right. So do we all agree to include that chapter as they've edited it? Okay. Moving on then to 21. General penalty enforcement. Please note that this model penalty provision is a default provision that applies to ordinance infractions where there are no penalty is provided. It imposes the maximum penalties under state laws as generally accepted.
Now, this was in our old code as well. Basically, there was a statement in our existing city code that says any violation of the code is a misdemeanor, unless we say it's a gross misdemeanor, or maybe it's the other way around. But that's what we're talking about here, is just if we don't specify in the code section when we're talking about a specific violation, then any violation is this.
I'm getting nods, so I'm marking that down as acceptable. All right. Number 22, abandoned motor vehicles. Please note that we seem to have inserted the wrong pronoun in the expression "as they" may be amended from time to time, since it is relating back to a chapter we suggest to an Minnesota, MS is Minnesota statutes, correct? Yeah, is relating back to a Minnesota statutes chapter. We suggest revising this language to read "as it may be amended from time to time." Since it is a single chapter and not plural sections, shall we do so? And Chris has advised that we do that. So I'm getting nods again. 23, individual sewage treatment standards. Please note that this section refers to 6 MCAR 4-8040, which is no longer valid. We suggest replacing this reference with a reference to Minnesota Rules Chapter 7080. Shall we do so? And that's another one where Chris has recommended that we do that. I looked away, but I think everyone's agreeing there, so I'll just check that off as well. All right. General provisions. Please note that this section contains a reference to State Board of Health Water Well Construction Code, which does not appear to be valid. So we suggest replacing this with Minnesota Rules Chapter 4007 125. Shall we do so? And this is another one where Chris is suggesting that we use their suggestion. Getting nods, so checking that off. Okay, number 25, prohibitions and limitations. Please note that Division B contains a reference to 307A of the Clean Water Act. To further assist codebook users in locating this reference material, we suggest completing this reference with being 33 USC. Shall we do so? And this is another one where Chris has said that we should use their recommendation. Getting nods, agreeing. Industrial discharges, and this is just another one where Chris is recommending that we use the recommendation. Industrial discharges. Please note that Division B contains a reference to 307B of the Clean Water Act. To further assist codebook users, we suggest referencing the material again. So I'm getting nods, so check that. Okay, 27, sewer service charge. This one will take some administrative review just to make sure that all of this information is still accurate. Please review carefully the table located in Division C in the material that we have received from you. The contents of this table were jumbled in one column, which did not make sense. We are uncertain if this table is accurate. If this table accurately reflects your intent as it is presented, please review it and advise us of any specific revisions that are needed. Unless otherwise instructed by you, we will retain this table as it is presented in your draft. So I can pull that up just a second. Here's the table, if I'm not mistaken. And I think that'll just be a matter of checking that with Tom to make sure that it's still accurate.
Yeah, and it's definitely not accurate. So just so you know, like 5/8 is supposed to be the first meter size, and you can see it embedded in the demand ratio side of that. But there is a table that we have that shows our intent in terms of the fixed fee ratio based on the water meter size, and we'll be able to get that table sent to them, hopefully in a clean enough way.
All right. On to 29. Motor vehicle noise limits. Please note that this section contains a reference to State Pollution Control Agency rules, which is incorrect. We suggest this reference to refer to 7030-1000 through 7030-1060. Shall we do so? And this is another one where Chris has advised us to take their suggestion. All right, getting nods. Just a moment here. Okay. Number 30, Chapter 74, Snowmobiles, Ordinance 102 and Ordinance 196 appear to conflict. 182 eliminates Old Code 70-127 and 7-128, and the other more recent Ordinance 196 amends 70-127. We've included the amended 70-127's per ordinance 196, but please review these two ordinances in this chapter and indicate if anything should be changed. And this refers to speed limits, if I'm not mistaken. And I can try to pull that up. Just a moment. Ooh. Not coming up for me.
Well, it's Patrick. It's in there in chapter 74. I'm not sure what page it's on. It's calling it page 11, but that doesn't seem right. Maybe it's on page 11. I'll check there.
Okay. Now, animals, but that's,
Yeah, you're still in chapter 90. So
oh, 74, I see. 36. Sorry about this.
I think I found 182.
Okay.
yeah, so that first page, you can see the speed limit, Patrick, 7402. We say it's 25 miles per hour. And then if you scroll down to the next, it's the following page, I believe. So under operations and snowmobiles, right here now you can see
Go with an awfully interesting
15 miles per hour.
coincidence, but have you checked it?
And I'm going to have to mute you, Patrick. Since you're in the middle of our office and we're open today. So in any case, this is a tricky one. Now we have what's probably occurred was multiple times as city councils over the years have talked about snowmobiles, they've passed an ordinance that touched on it in one way or another and ended up with artifacts of these speed limits that disagree with each other. And so we have some options here. We can pick one that we want to go with and just be consistent. Or we can adopt it as is, knowing that it's in conflict, but it's the lower one that's going to control, and put this on our list of future policy discussions, because there might be a lot more of the things we want to talk about in terms of snowmobile operations when it comes to this ordinance. So I guess that's up to you all to guide us on.
I would think we should leave it in place and then have a discussion later. As long as, you know, the lower limit is controlling right now. I really don't see people whipping around that fast that often, so I don't think it'd be an issue.
Does everyone agree with that? Okay. All right. Moving on to number 31. Chapter 75, truck route. Please review this schedule in light of Minnesota Statute 169, which places a gross weight limit of 9,000 pounds on any wheel of a vehicle and on an unpaved street, but a 10,000 pound limit on any vehicle on any paved street, and 18,000 pound restriction per axle on any unpaved streets, and 20,000 pounds per axle on paved streets. Minnesota statute 169.823 is not applicable to vehicles that are operated exclusively in any city that has in effect an ordinance regulating the gross weight of vehicles in the city. Please review this and advise if any revisions are needed. Unless it is instructed otherwise, by either you or your attorney, we shall retain the schedule as it is currently edited. And this is one where Chris has suggested that we retain it. Seeing nods, we'll just check that down.
Those provisions, when they're within the city limits, and I think of like the Gunflint Trail, Highway 61, those are all state roads. So do their regulations trump ours if they're any different? Or do ours trump theirs if they would be any different? Do we know?
We don't actually regulate theirs. So when we talk about truck routes and restricted streets, what our code says is the use of all city streets, and using the term city actually is now excluding a county state aid highway or a state highway. We're not trying to control them. And then we also say what the truck routes are. So in that sense, we do, but I think we'd have to do that sort of conversation in cooperation with the county. When we're talking about which of their roads we want to have designated as truck routes, it's really more important, I think, what the county engineer's designation is than what we say. So this, what we're suggesting here is not make any changes to this section because it's working. And I think that's another one where if there is an issue where we want to deal with what's the truck route, we've got a good process in place and an ability to update the code, and we can just deal with that separately.
All right.
We just had a question about this too the other day. This is actually the good part, maybe the painful part about this process is we literally have to read the entire code multiple times, and you find stuff, right? And but thankfully we found this and we knew where it was when somebody called and said, "There's a sign on my street that says no trucks allowed," and they weren't being able to get deliveries. And now we have to say, well, here's where the city code is. And it actually says, doesn't apply to road maintenance, doesn't apply to service and delivery vehicles, doesn't apply to. So tricky stuff. But it also says the county engineer is going to put signs up everywhere that says no trucks allowed. So, well, there you go.
All right. So for the next, the general regulations, Chris commented on all of these. So this is number 32 through 35, that we accept the changes that AOP is suggesting. So I'll just read those with that in mind. Motor vehicles, please note that this section contains a reference to State Pollution Control Agency rules 7030-1000 through 7030-1600, which is incorrect. We suggest revising this reference. Shall we do so? Adoptions of rules. Again, this is they're advising that we replace the references to Minnesota statutes. Existing mooring buoys. Again, they're advising we replace the references. And then number 35 is ordinance 188 was sent, but amends an ordinance that was not sent. Please send ordinance 138 so that both of these ordinances may be included in the code. And that number 35 has been, I've sent that ordinance. So does everyone agree that we should go along with using these updated references to Minnesota state statute on motor vehicles, adoption of rules, and mooring buoys? All right. Okay, number 36. Insurance policies. Please review this section with your attorney and advise us of any needed revisions that we should make in light of the following. This section does not appear to conform to Minnesota Statute 221.141B, which requires insurance to be at least the amount required of interstate carriers under 49 CFR 387.33, which requires $5 million in coverage for any vehicle with a seating capacity of 16 or more, including the driver, and a $1.5 million for any vehicle with a seating capacity of under 15, including the driver. And so for this one, Chris has also recommended to use those best practices.
We're talking about taxi cab licenses here, right?
Yeah. I'm getting nods on that one.
That's a big business in Grand Marais.
Is just taxi, or does that also include like AUA? Senior centers. I mean, they operate within our city. Anybody know?
I'm scrolling ahead, Craig, to
Oh, okay, thanks. I didn't know if that was just specifically taxi or any vehicle that carries a person other than I guess, a school bus.
yeah, I don't think it applies to them, but I want to read the definition to make sure. It says, no person shall operate a taxi cab business or car rental business without having received a license. So I'd say that does not apply to AUA, and I'm sure that we've never actually talked about granting them a license.
Does anybody in town rent cars? I don't know if Jeans does anymore, or
I don't think anybody does.
Well, Jeans does. Yep.
I wondered.
Yep. I rented from him.
So I think I got agreement on 36. All right. So 37. Chris's comment on 37 is that ALP is raising constitutional issues with the city's begging ordinance. I recommend that the city delete this ordinance as it is likely unenforceable. In the event of the city's desires to have some sort of solicitation ordinance in its code, the issue will need to be researched and an ordinance will need to be brought forward for council consideration in the future. If you'd like me to research and draft the same, please let me know. Any changes related to these issues should be consistent with state law. And so, see here, 37, begging, it's got the code there. And then, since this section bans all begging regardless of forum, shall we delete this section from your code? If you opt to retain this section within your code, please note that the reference section in the statutory reference has been repealed. Do you wish to replace it with a reference to Minnesota Statute 609-74 referring to public nuisances instead? So this is one that is going to require some discussion.
So Patrick, this is Jay. So basically, if I'm reading this right, it says we have the option to either take the begging ordinance off of the record and not make a statement about begging, or we have to take a look at what the Minnesota state statute is and modify our existing statute so that it's in line with the state statute. Is that what I'm reading?
Yes.
And even if we do that, Jay, they're suggesting that it's a U.S. Constitution issue and
Right.
that it's not likely to be enforceable. And so Chris is recommending that we delete it. And if it's an issue you want to deal with, that we take it up at a later date.
I guess I have no problem taking it out, but that would depend on what the rest of the council thinks too.
Yeah, I would go along with what Chris was saying. I think that makes sense.
I'm getting nods. Okay. All right. 38. Curfew. Please note that your prior code provisions are codified in your draft. However, you're enclosing for your convenience and consideration more up-to-date model provisions from the NBC. We suggest replacing this section with the enclosed model to bring it up to date with current constitutional requirements. Shall we do so? This is one where Chris recommends AOP's suggestion. Any disagreement with that?
Can we see that up-to-date model, Patrick?
Yeah, just a moment here. Can everyone see that?
Yeah.
Now, Patrick, that is their new suggestion, or is it our existing language?
That looks like our existing.
Let's
I
see.
think that they're new. That's part of the second draft, right?
Yeah, this is from the second draft. So let's see. I'm just going back to how they worded this.
And did we have a curfew in the previous ordinance?
Yes.
Interesting.
We have lots of stuff.
We're enclosing for your convenience a more up-to-date model. So it looks like this is the new language.
We just don't know what the old language was. Or
Mike's looking for it right now.
I mean, I think it's pretty fair for us to assume that the old language had, either terminology that's no longer used or standards that are not enforceable. I mean, I would assume if it's consistency with what we've seen changed already, those would be the main things. But what'd you find, Mike?
That is our existing language.
Note. I don't think.
Can we maybe just make a note to ask them then, Patrick?
Yeah, I'll ask.
It's kind of good to double check. I mean, to spot pick some of these and double check them and see, since we're for it.
Assuming that we want to maintain an ordinance on curfew. So
I think it would be a very good idea considering some of the climate of our community.
Yeah, so what the question they asked and what Chris recommended is that we take their up-to-date language, which means we would keep a curfew rule in city code and that it would follow best practices in terms of constitutionality based on their opinion and based on Chris's opinion. So we'll definitely get it in front of you all, but I think that's the right path for us to go down anyway, is to keep it on the books and keep it up to date so it's enforceable.
All right. Rubbish burning. Please note that, or does everyone agree with that? Yeah, okay. Rubbish burning. Please note that this section refers to section 1451, but chapter 14 of your old code was repealed. Please advise how you would like this section to be revised or whether it should be deleted. Absent specific instructions from you, we shall simply retain this section as it is presently edited. I'll pull that up. All right, that's pretty straightforward. And
Those blocks 22, 23, 24, where are those at?
Yeah, and where are the fire limits described in section 14-51? So I think that is all downtown. And those blocks 22, 23, 24, I believe are from the village plat. I don't know why we would have a section of town where we would allow rubbish burning and a section where we wouldn't.
Yeah, I think that needs to be changed. Something we could probably figure out right here and right now.
I'm sorry, Patrick, did Chris have anything to say about that one?
no, he left that up to us.
Well, prior to reading this, I assumed it was city limits, but I didn't know in part of town you could burn in other parts you can't. So it'd make it easy if you were to just say it's the current city limits.
Yep.
I would go for that. I think that's way easier because I have no idea even how to look up blocks 22, 23, and 24 at present. You know, I'm sure we could find it in the survey information, but it just seems easier to say it within city limits.
Pretty sure that's up in my neighborhood.
I was going to say, do we do any burning up? What I want to say is what we call the old burn pile by the water tower. Are we doing that anymore? Or it seems to me, I didn't think so. I thought that had stopped.
It stopped. All
Yeah.
brush is getting hauled. All the brush now is getting hauled up to the Eskers at Devil's Track. The
So
DNR
then it
location.
okay, so it should say no. Can we change rubbish to garbage? Is there no?
No, that it's actually defined in the ordinance, and they're different.
Oh, okay,
And you know, it's not leaves either. So
okay.
there's another section where we talk about open burning in city code.
So wait, they're saying you can't burn branches? That rubbish and branches?
Rubbish is not rubbish.
Brush.
Is garbage, the way
Rubbish is not brush, right?
Okay.
And technically, I think if you're going to burn branches or wood, you need a permit from the fire chief, don't you? Is that how that works?
we actually just let the DNR do all of
Okay.
our fire burning permits.
Okay.
But I am serious. I think block 22 is, that's my house. I'm pretty sure. I mean, I wasn't saying that so I could burn stuff. I'm saying that actually they're excluding tree trail apparently.
Well, we can haul stuff up there and burn it, can't we?
Yeah, sure.
Burn barrel up there for me?
The difference is, Anton, that your house is in the Blackwell edition. So I think
Oh,
that
yeah.
these are actually talking about blocks downtown in the Village Plat.
Gotcha.
But obviously the fact that we're not being specific enough without including the addition they're in or the plat that they're in is a problem.
Do we need to make a motion to change that then, to say within the city limits?
I think if you want to, go ahead.
Then I would make a motion that we change ordinance 130.08 to say no person shall burn rubbish within the city limits, period.
I'll second that. Is there any further discussion on this? Anton, your vote?
I
Kelly, your vote?
Aye.
Michael, your vote?
Aye.
Craig, your vote?
Aye.
I am an aye. Motion carries. All right. So that's only reading number 1, correct? I mean, we're changing ordinances. We got to do this twice, don't we?
You're not even, Pat, this is not an ordinance reading at all. You're just amending the draft, and there will be a whole approval process that's separate.
All right. Oops. Wrong one. Okay. Number 40, 150-01 definition. Please note that this section defines the term trailer, camper, or motorhome. However, the term that is defined in state law in Minnesota Statute 327.14 recreational camping vehicle, it is also a slightly different definition than the one in your code. The text of the statute is set out below. Do you wish to revise this section to read verbatim the text of the state law shown below? Here is that language. And then Chris is recommending that we use ALP's suggested language. Getting nods. All right. On to 41. Occupancy during construction. Please review this section in light of Minnesota Statute 327.28, which requires that adequate sanitary and water supplies are available for occupants' use 24 hours a day, and advise that if any revisions to the section are needed unless otherwise instructed, we shall retain this section as it is presently edited. Chris's information on this is that he says you'll need to review what they're asking and determine how to proceed. If you'd like me to look at this further, let me know.
Do we know what this is really referring to? Occupancy during construction? Are we
Let
talking?
me pull that up just a second.
It seems like that's saying that when you're building something, you can't live there until you have water and sewer. But maybe I'm reading that too simply.
That you're getting to what their suggestion is that the state is actually requiring, but this is what our code says right here. This idea that you can live on a trailer during construction. This is almost exclusively used as a limiting rule. So people say, I want to bring my trailer up and stay on my vacant lot in my trailer all summer. And we say, I'm sorry, the city code does not allow that. And here is the place where it says it doesn't allow that. here's the only reason anyone is ever allowed to stay in a trailer. They actually have to have a land use permit that is granted, and they can only do it for a period not exceeding 3 months. So now the review is suggesting that this may not be adequate, and that it may not be a good idea to allow people to stay in a trailer during construction either if they don't have adequate water, sewer, and well, frankly, I think it's going to take some work to figure out what that means. And so the easy course here might be just to repeal this, because I don't think that would do much harm. I don't remember the last time somebody actually got permission to live in their trailer while they were doing construction.
You just said, Mike, that this is a limiting part of the ordinance. So, you know, if we want to continue that, you know, don't just move up here in the summer with your camper. Do we have another place in the code that we're able to speak to that?
Yeah, and that's actually just right up. You can just catch the end of it right above there. So that's what this chapter is saying: is occupancy is not allowed, and here's the only time it is allowed. So if you don't have a building permit, then you can't stay in your trailer on your vacant lot in town.
Okay, so this is basically saying if we repeal 150.06, then that's just saying you can't live in your camper, well, you know, at your property, period.
Unless it's an approved trailer park.
Okay. Well, what does the council think about that? I mean, I think that I can see definitely some places where it would be handy to have that option available for people, but it like Mike is saying, I don't, you know, in my time as mayor, it's not ever come up that somebody's going to do this. So I don't, I mean, and not saying that it wouldn't, but thoughts?
Do we have a way that explains? I mean, I can see, so somebody parks a trailer, figure out a water source, but we also have if they don't have a way to drain their sewer on their property, like say we decided to tear down the house and redo, I might be able to connect into sewer, but otherwise there's a dump station that still works at the park and stuff, right? So
yeah, and we would certainly let people come down there for a fee to do that. The thing I don't understand yet is, what does the state statute define adequate as? Do we get to use our judgment, or is there some sort of rule out there that describes in more specificity what they mean? And we'll have to look into it. I don't know.
Yeah, I think we would want to be specific as to that people can put it on a lot, but they can't dump their gray water in their sewer tank right on. And I don't know why you would want to, but to not have them dump it on their lot.
I just think this is a good something to put in the hopper for future consideration if it becomes an issue. And a place where it could potentially become an issue is in our continuations of discussions about housing. If we want to try and find a way for this to be a housing option for people, then we might dig in and do some more research on that and figure out what the state rules say. But if we're just talking about this occupancy during construction, it just doesn't happen.
So
So
I'm
our
not sure.
options are to either leave it in here and then not, and then we'll have to do we'll have to do research on what adequate means for sewer, you know, because that's what the state requires, or we take it out and then we go back at it at some point if the issue ever comes up. Does that sound like a summary of our options?
yeah,
Well, I'd say we take it out and then work on it later then. I mean, that seems to be the most straightforward way of doing it. What does the rest of the council think?
I guess I'm a little conflicted, but I'd like to hear more from you guys. I like the idea of supporting people while they build a home. I mean, we do want people to build and to stay here, and maybe it's not used much, but maybe for that very reason, it's fine. I mean, it sort of sends a signal like we do support people in constructing homes and whatever. I mean, if there's no harm being done, I don't know. I might want to leave that in there, but if it's a complication, I get that too.
I think the only complication that they're bringing up to us is there might be some inconsistency with state law. Having said that it's never used, though, I don't know that we're putting ourselves at much risk leaving it on the books either.
Yeah. Well, I'm not the state, but I am kind of thinking that there are a lot of RVs in the state. So apparently the state must think that they're adequate. So I don't know what the state ruling is on what's adequate or not, but I would think an RV with a gray water holding tank and a freshwater holding tank would be adequate, as long as it's portable and the unit can be moved and emptied. I don't disagree with I agree with leaving it in. I don't see what much damage it is going to do. But I also can see if you do take it out, somebody might buy a piece of land, start building a house, put a camper on it, start living in it and building. They're doing it anyway. So now how are we going to address that? Are we going to say, well, it's okay as long as you only do this for 3 months? We don't have we need to probably have something on the books that deals with it. I don't know. That's kind of what I'm thinking.
I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense, Craig. I mean, and what Michael said too, we just passed an ordinance that was supposed to, remove a ton of barriers for people to develop homes here. And it, I could see it going either way. If we take this off the books, then we have an opportunity to rewrite it from scratch. If we leave it on the books, then we at least have a placeholder for it. I mean, and then either way, I think we're going to have to come back and we're going to have to do some work on it, because it's going to, if we leave it in there, we're going to have to work on state compatibility. And if we take it out, then we have the possibility of running into an issue of a barrier that we don't need to have for development. So,
yeah.
So I guess I'm fine either way, but maybe, Patrick, we just flag it and we say, hey, this is something we're going to come back to and talk about it, at a future conversation.
Well, I think we do need to, we have a deadline to get these answers into American Legal. So I think we should have that conversation soon.
I don't think we're going to have any more conversation than they just had, though, Patrick. I think that what we tell American Legal is leave it as is.
Okay.
Or
Got it.
Or just tell them that we want it as close to as is as it can be, and in line with state statute. I mean, I don't know.
But they're not suggesting that they're going to change any of it, Jay. I mean, they're telling us we need to talk to our city attorney and get it fixed. So we'll put it on the list of future code things for us to sort.
Okay.
All right. So I've taken that we're leaving it in, and noting that we want to circle back to this in the future. Okay. So the next two are things that are going to need to be updated. The 42 and 43 are referring to zoning, and since they've reviewed this, we've updated our zoning code in its entirety. It might not affect the language that they're talking about here, but just note that we will be sending them a whole new zoning code. So number 42, chapter 152 zoning code. Please note that zoning code had many amendments, but the most recent zoning ordinance appeared to be 2008-05, which contained a lot of underlining and strikeout. We used that ordinance because it was the most recent. We did not include any ordinance from prior to 2008, as they appear to be superseded by this one. So this will be updated when we send them the new ordinance. Please review the table at the end of this report, which contains notes that appeared throughout this chapter that we have retained whenever they appeared. Please review the table and advise whether these notes should remain as edited or whether they should be deleted. Unless otherwise instructed by you, we'll simply retain them as they're presented, as they're presently edited in your draft.
So we're going to look at those. I don't think we're going to keep any of them. I think they'll all just get deleted. I think those notes are all artifacts of going through the process of creating that ordinance. So we sent them a Word document that was the ordinance that was passed in 2008. And those documents always have a lot of the previous revision artifacts inside of them, including comments. So I don't think any of that is something that we'd ever show in our published zoning ordinance. Nice that we have it in that old Word file. I mean, we still have that file that we sent them. So if somebody was doing some research on how did this all happen, they won't go away, but they won't live in the official codified version of the ordinance. And that 2008 was when we changed the C1 district to downtown waterfront, Highway 61, and mixed use. So that was a pretty big revision. And I think their approach is fine. Like that ordinance with all of its underscore and strikeouts did include an up-to-date version of zoning as amended by previous ordinances.
How did that, or does that exclude then the changes that we just made in the zoning ordinance? Is that something that is going to have to be added in later then?
It is, yeah. And so, we sent them these, and then we passed a giant housing related ordinance that modified a lot of the zoning ordinance. And you can see in this draft, none of that's included. We'll be sending it to them since they requested that we send them any ordinances we've passed since. And I don't know whether they're going to go ahead and put those changes in or whether they're going to say, wait a minute, this is more work than you hired us for. Either way, we can figure it out. The beauty of this system is whatever document they hand us, it's easy for us to make the changes. So we'll work on getting them to incorporate them, but either way, we'll get it figured out.
All right. Number 44, sign regulations. And so I'm going to read Chris's comment on this before we jump into it. ALP is suggesting a legal review of your sign ordinance. They are correct in suggesting such a review, as there are certainly potential legal issues related to various provisions in the existing ordinance and the various case law related to it. If you'd like us to review and suggest language changes to the sign ordinance, please let us know. Such a project would need to take place separate from the recodification project. And so they've said they highly suggest that we have our attorney review your sign regulations carefully in light of the following. The following is not meant to be an all-inclusive list of the case law concerning signs. Rather, these issues are common problem areas, both in theory and practice. We especially recommend that the city attorney closely examine any content-based regulations, particularly relating to political signs and commercial signs. In the meantime, unless otherwise directed, we will make no revisions to your sign regulations. And so
that's our suggestion, is we don't make any revisions to our sign regulations, but this is top of the list when it comes to code things that need to be fixed after the codification is done. And this is kind of current events. Like there was a lot of good discussion about this during the last election, and there was some good reporting on it. And so we've kind of known that this is something we want to fix. And as soon as the recodification is done, I'd recommend that we do what Chris is saying and what they're saying and get started.
all right. Number 45, automobile service stations in the H61 district. Please note that this division B4 contains a reference to the fire zone regulations of Chapter 21. but we did not receive a chapter 21. It is not clear which section this should refer to which section this should refer. Please provide the appropriate substitute reference or other instructions. Unless otherwise instructed by you, we shall retain this section as it is presently edited. So, this one, I wasn't able to find the chapter 21. So I'm not sure.
Yeah, this one is a problem because this language is in our zoning ordinance, which has not been codified. And so it's got a whole different chapter section numbering system included in it. And I'm not sure, it's just going to take a little more detective work to figure out what they were talking about. But there is fire zone regulations included in the city code. And I think we'll be able to figure out where this comes from. And if not, then we'll be able to figure out how to modify the language so it's not necessary to make the reference.
All right. Number 46, 152.46, junked vehicles. Shall we include an appropriate cross-reference to State Statute 34.02? And Chris is recommending that yes, we should include the cross-reference. So I'm getting nods. And so we don't have a comment on 47, and that completes, I think, what we need to go through today in terms of getting back to them for the report.
Patrick, can we look at Chris's other recommendation when it comes to section?
Oh, yeah. Just a second here. I'm going to pull it up. Can you see
Yes.
that? Okay. And which part are you referring to, Mike?
Nuisances.
There we go.
I was just gonna ask you that. Did we strike 130.03? Public nuisances? I think we decided to take that out. And I saw it kind of got picked up in Curfew a little bit, a few clips. So are we not gonna address?
Oh, I see.
The nuisances are included in the draft as chapter 91. So we took
Okay.
everything that was in the old code and it's still in the new code. And Chris is pointing out that there's some inadequacies in here that need to be addressed.
Okay.
So again, this is not something we need to figure out tonight, but we just wanted to say, same strategy. We should probably just adopt what we have, but this needs to get pretty high on the list in terms of follow-up work to get the code fixed. And so this issue that Chris is talking about with nuisances, the issue that both Chris and ALP talked about with our sign ordinance, I think those are kind of the two things that are high priority follow-up to get the code fixed. There's a lot of other little things that we've talked about we're going to sort through administratively and get get fixed before you even adopt the recodification, but these are two biggies and they'll come afterwards. And I think they also kind of mesh in nicely with what we've been doing again with code enforcement, and they'll actually directly address some of the issues that we've been talking about, but they also will walk us through the same process that we can use to talk about a couple of the other issues, in particular this nuisance one.
Yeah, and that nuisance one has come up a number of times in different issues and conversations and public comment and things like that. So yeah, we should definitely expect to see this coming back.
All right.
Okay.
Are folks feeling comfortable with where we're at on this?
Yep.
Okay.
Is there a little of, the codification I'm good with, but is there a way maybe as we talk about undertaking some of these and looking at them to kind of do it, I don't know, meeting by meeting, and not that we have to spend 2 or 3 hours, or maybe some of them are going to take us, longer, but if we wanted to work on code 74, that it comes in our packet, that we at least familiarize ourselves with, that maybe we come back at the next meeting, start talking about what changes do we think need to be made, just so that little, kind of picking away at it a little bit. I know that we've got other things that we're working on and want to do, but sometimes tasks are so daunting that if every time we're talking about something, even if it's for 20 minutes, we get some of that stuff taken away if it's always on our plate and we're looking at it and moving forward with it. But I don't know what Mike thinks of that. I definitely don't know what the other counselors think, but I just think sometimes it's a good way to get things completed is each time just kind of come back and go, are we comfortable with this? What do we want to change? Boom, it's in place. Now let's move on to code 75, then 76, or whatever it may be.
Yeah, Kelly, I would paraphrase that in my mind anyway. What I hear is, what process are we going to create to continually stay on top of this and keep it up to date? And so the process that you describe is, do we just take a chunk of it and every meeting or every other meeting or every some period of time just randomly but systematically put it on the agenda and look at it? I don't know whether that's the right process, but we need one, right? That's the idea here, is we want to be able to continually review this language. So is there a different way to do it other than the systematic start at the beginning and walk through it, that also accesses what the council says their priorities are and gets the public involved in the conversation? That's what I'd want to explore a little bit. So what if we instead did something like put them systematically in our monthly newsletter that we're creating and try to see, which ones generate comments and conversation. And if they do, then okay, there's a live one. Let's put that in front of the council and look at it and talk about it. There's some mix of those two that we can figure out. But our approach has in the past been, when there's an issue that we're really directly dealing with and we notice a problem, then we try to address it, or we decide we don't need to. And obviously that means there's lots of this that we never look at because it just doesn't come up, and we need to find a way to make sure you get a chance to see those too. So I think that's a conversation worth continuing until we've got a system that you're comfortable with. Like, okay, this is how we're going to do it.
Yeah, and I kind of like to get out ahead of it, because what you're talking about is when people bring it up or it becomes a problem, and I get that, but I feel like we're on the back end, like we're putting out fires. We're not trying to address something before it becomes a big issue, which is typically how things get done. Is, well, now this is really pressing and burning. Fix this, but maybe even if it's that once we kind of have this put together and something out there that, as counselors, we can, I don't know, there's 5 of us. Can we break it up in sections and say, take a look at these sections, Michael, take a look at these, Jay, take a look at these, Craig, Anta, and Kelly, and then bring back where you see that hey, these areas in my section really need us looking at or need some fixing. You know, whatever that methodology may be, I guess. But again, I like to, if we can be more proactive than reactive, that would be so nice.
I'd say give yourself a little credit on that too, though. I think that a lot of the work that we've done, a lot of the really difficult work that we've done on housing and things, in some ways that's reactive because we've said it's a priority, but in a lot of ways it's proactive because we're trying to come up with solutions for things, and we don't know that, you know, that we haven't had a million people knocking on our doors saying, I want that particular thing that you've got in the housing ordinance. We're asking experts to come up with best practices to come in, you know. So I think you've done a lot of proactive work as well. What worries me is how much work is involved in going through that process when you think about the housing ordinance. And that's a doozy, but there really are a lot of issues that if you want to attack them at that level, take that much time and effort. And so then how do we keep room for those big pieces and yet at the same time don't leave the rest of it just sitting there for 15 or 20 years and never to be looked at? Because there's a lot of stuff in the code that, well, if I was writing it tomorrow, I probably wouldn't bother including because it just doesn't seem useful or relevant. But there it is. It's the code. So that's, like I said, that's a good conversation, I think, to keep on and keep talking about and maybe even experiment with until we find something that we're comfortable with. Well, hey, that's all we got, everybody.
That's all of it?
We're
this
not
point-
here till 6?
What's that?
We're not here till 6 o'clock?
Nope.
Woo.
Well, the dog's happy too, yeah. Well, that's okay. Great. Well, then we can, you know, think about ways we want to get through the, you know, that continued recodification like Kelly was saying, but those comments are going to be passed on and then we'll go from there, right? I mean, very cool.
Yeah, these will get back to American Legal, and then they'll submit a final draft for your review.
And at that point, we'll take it to council meetings and we'll go through the official approval process.
Cool. Anything else?
Nope. Thanks for coming, everybody.
Thanks,
Yeah.
everybody. Good night.
Good night.
See you next week.
Yep. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Patrick.